We're really good at being soft. We're women. But we can also be bold in that softness too. From an empathetic, that's what I think our superpower as women is empathy. So you vulnerable, you tell people what you're doing and then see what bubbles up.
Welcome to She Leads, a podcast about leadership, faith, and relationships. I am Thea, your host, and I'm so glad that you joined in today. She Leads is a place where we're hoping to build community. I would love to hear your feedback, your questions, your comments. And so each week I offer you an opportunity to share your thoughts on each week's episode. You can send those directly to me at sheleadscomments@gmail.com. And I like to share those that I do receive. So I received this one from Gina regarding our Childhood Matters episode, where she said, I love the conversation you two had. I definitely think it's important to acknowledge that kids are leaders. Leadership is inside all of us, and it's our job to help foster it in kids so they grow into adult leaders too. As a homeschool mom, some of our greatest benefits are fostering that growth in our own kids. Thank you, Gina, for your comment. Thank you for joining the conversation. And I hope that you'll continue to send your comments and feedback too. Today, I'm so excited to continue to welcome Amy Vogel as we continue our conversation. If you missed her last episode, go back and listen to that, Moving Forward, where she talks about her work as a published writer and healing. And today I want to talk more about leadership. And so, Amy, go ahead and reintroduce yourself to us today.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me again. And my name is Amy Vogel. Amy W. Vogel is my professional name. And I'm an author. I'm a speaker. I'm a consultant. I like to bring hope, create spaces for healing, and share vision through story. And so people can find out more about me on my website. It's amywvogel.mycanva.site. And, I'm on Instagram as well as what is my handle? AW Vogel. Like, it should be all the same, but it's not. AW Vogel.
There's probably another Amy out there that stole
Probably.
it. So tell me, we talked last episode about your writing. Tell me what writer are you consuming right now, or what's something that you're consuming? Maybe it's not a writer. Maybe it's something deeper or less deep.
Yeah.
What are you consuming right now? What are you really taking in?
I'm reading a lot of fantasy fiction, and I read a lot of steamy fantasy fiction.
Okay.
But the most recent nonfiction that I read was called Mary Magdalene Revealed. It's by Megan Waterston, and it's really interesting. Her tagline is Mary Magdalene something, and then the Christianity we haven't tried yet. And it's really about how to integrate the feminine aspect of God into our internal spiritual growth process. It's really beautiful.
Interesting. I'll have to check that out. Awesome. All right. And so when I was introduced to Amy, as we started talking and you shared all the things that you are doing, I'll be really honest, I kind of went fangirl, and I was like, you are doing exactly what I want to do. You're writing, you're speaking, you're leading, you're consulting. Tell me a little bit more about those places that you're leading, and how'd you get into that? How do I become you?
Well, good luck. I don't know if you want to do that. But when I had a really devastating loss that was the source material for my book Come to Me, I spent a long time healing. And so when I was at a place where I wanted to go back to work, I was like, well, maybe it's not in a church ministry context. Maybe I want to work for a nonprofit. And I was applying to all these nonprofit jobs, and nothing was really connecting. And so in January of this year, I thought, well, I've already written one book. I was speaking for a living even before I was preaching at church, and I like to help other people tell stories. So maybe I'll just try that out. And so the company was born, and our because it's more than just me, not really, but the first project was Come to Me. And so we've got some more other projects, and it's grown since then. I thought I would do more ministry consulting, but really what I'm consulting is helping other people tell stories. I help nonprofits with grant writing. I help other people who want to publish their own works. I help people with their content creation for speaking. So there's three prongs. There's the the writing and the speaking piece, and then those are probably the most public. And then kind of in the background is the consulting, but I love to do that too.
So how does this become a thing? How does it become more than just a dream? Like, what are the steps you have to take to be a real company?
Good question. I'm working on that, but one, you have to have somebody willing to invest, and that was my husband, and you have to have the time and the drive to do it, and so I've always been in business, and so having that business acumen, I knew that I could do something like this, but the whole process of self-publishing was a huge learning curve for me, and I'm still learning because there's so many pieces to it, and you could pay somebody to do all of that for you, whether you're an indie writer or you want to go traditional publishing. I just was like, I'm just going to do this myself. I've had the experience with the traditional publisher, and I want to do it myself this time around. And so the consulting, the storytelling piece of it for consulting kind of came about as nothing was really coming available for ministry consulting. And then I just started talking to some people, and they're like, oh, I'd like to do this. And, I have these letters I'm thinking about turning into letters from my grandparents. I'm thinking about turning into a book. And, so there's just been things that have come up along the way that kept telling me to keep going. And so I'm working on incorporating into a business, and I'm still working on all the business side of things because I'm only 6 months into this. But yeah, I just felt led to it and jumped in.
I love it that you said, as you get going, then it starts to kind of almost evolve on its own.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, there's a sense that maybe God is leading where this is really going to go. And then it becomes your job to be a good follower and to be willing to be open to the Spirit. So you're just 6 months in. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there's a lot of exciting things. You're learning things. What are some of the obstacles that you've already encountered?
Yeah, well, just the whole learning curve on self-publishing, understanding the costs of certain things, like how much does it actually cost to have somebody design a cover for you? How, do I need to pay for this transcribing or this formatting service? Just some of the things, there's so many free resources out there between different associations, but everybody wants to also sell you something. Yeah. So just that trial and error of trying to figure out what really you need, what you can do, and what you can't do. The website that's currently out there now, I actually did and designed myself, and it's okay. But I realized this summer I was going to redo it, and then I thought, no, I need somebody who has actually experience to do this to make it look more professional. And so I outsourced that. So you've got to figure out what your lane is, and then what you can outsource and work with other partners for that will get you the best quality result.
Yeah. What have been some of your big wins in the past 6 months as you launched this?
Published a book.
Yeah.
Finding a great cover designer, a graphic designer. I actually used to work with him at the church where I used to work. Having a launch party, understanding that there are ways to get reviews and help that you need. So for my fiction book project, I'm not good at writing the back cover. You think because you're a writer, you can write all the things, and no, it just doesn't work. So I recently had somebody help me for, I think it was $25. She helped me, and we went back and forth for about 2 weeks. I'm like, I think she's making like pennies on this. But you're going back and forth to write a really excellent book cover that would draw people in, but draw people in. Invite. Thank you. I write for a living. Yeah. Just things like that. Things gotchas you just don't know and have to learn along the way. And it's just part of it. I think I paid an outrageous amount as a small business for a subscription to create QR codes, because I thought I would be using lots more QR codes than I am. And now I'm like, well, that was a waste of $250.
Yeah.
So, just the things you've got to learn. Yeah. I always subscribe. There's like a 4-quadrant business idea where you start out and you're unconsciously incompetent, and then you move to consciously incompetent, and then you move to unconsciously competent, and then consciously competent. So I'm somewhere between consciously incompetent and unconsciously competent, if that makes sense. There's a lot of competency in there, but I'm somewhere between there because I'm still figuring it out. But I've been able to help other people, and you just have to you have to know your industry and know what you're doing. So there's lots of research and talking to people.
Yeah.
So it's like any other career.
When you mentioned your previous graphic designer, getting that person to work with you, like how have your relationships from before been a part of your success going now?
Well, just critical. One, because you need the support of people that they have to buy, for me, they had to buy my book. They had to come to my launch party. Like, it was never going to go anywhere if the people didn't show up and support it. But I love telling this story about how Gabriel Chapa Designs became my partner in all things graphics. I had contacted him, so I was talking to my friend LM, who put me in touch for this podcast, and she was like, "Oh, well, Gabriel's on his own now," and so I had emailed him and hadn't heard anything back. It had been a couple of days, but I was like, I'll try him again on Monday. Well, my youngest daughter plays soccer, and she was playing somewhere like out in Cyprus, and we had to drive there. And we walk up, and I think this was in April, and so it was still weird weather. We were all bundled up that Sunday morning at 8:00, and put my chair down next to this guy, and he's involved in conversation with this other woman. And I'm like, oh, gosh, I hope this guy, he's not going to be like offended because I yell and scream during soccer, and I don't always know what I'm talking about, but I'm very vocal. I'm a former athlete, so I think I know what I'm talking about. And I was like, oh man, I hope he doesn't get offended. And I hear this Amy, and I turn, and it's Gabriel.
Wow.
So if that wasn't like the biggest sign from heaven,
wow,
that we should be working together in some capacity. And my daughter actually ended up hurting his daughter during the game on accident, but we've been connected ever since.
That is really, really neat. Yeah, I bring that up because I think as any small business owner, or even just as you're trying to launch something new, like as a church planter, I can connect with this idea too, is your relationships are so key. Mm-hmm. And even I shared too, that when you showed up today to record, this is the first you're the first person that I didn't already know. Mm-hmm. So all of my guests, spoiler, have been people that were my friends and, right. and connectors. Well, we work together, we known each other, we've had some sort of personal relationship. And then, but because of, again, LM, this is her third or fourth shout out. She's really killing it these two episodes. Right. Because of LM and our connection, she introduced me to you. And actually since then, that's kind of started to happen. And so those connections, the relationships, one, you have people who already believe in you, are already fans, are already on your team. Right. And then, so they're willing to support, but then they're also willing to share that, right?
Absolutely.
To share that with so if LM didn't trust me, she wouldn't have offered you, right? And said, hey, would you guys want to talk and be able to make this connection if she and I already didn't have that relationship.
Yeah. And I think for other people just starting out, whatever it happens to be, you have to trust yourself enough to give it some time, because nothing happens. I mean, there's no such thing as an overnight success. There isn't. It's a total misnomer. Yeah. But also, there is a general sensitivity to where the Spirit is leading that you need to cultivate. Mm-hmm. Because if you get that feeling in your gut, like, ooh, I just had this recently on Instagram. Somebody contacted me, and it was cheap. It was like $25-$50 for supposedly this big promotional package that would give me all of these thousands of followers. And I was just like, she was really pushy, and I didn't, it didn't feel good.
Yeah.
And so I've learned to cultivate that sensitivity to say, for better or for worse, I just don't feel comfortable going in this direction.
Sure.
And then on the flip side, knowing that if it's a fear, or if it's something where you feel like you wouldn't be good enough, that's probably the direction you should go in. Mm-hmm. That, something doesn't feel good, you don't necessarily get good vibes or energy from the other person, but at the same time, if it's something that is meant for you, you're going to be uncomfortable doing it.
Yeah.
No matter how experienced you are. And so that's maybe the direction you should go in, and trust yourself, give yourself grace and compassion, and listen, like you said, to the people around you who already believe in you.
Right.
I remember telling two really good friends that I was good. I don't think I'm going to go to work for anybody else. I'm going to work for myself. And they were like, well, duh, I've known that for months. I'm like, well, things were not telling me, but I had to come to it myself. Yeah. So
I also wonder if, because I know I've definitely felt this way as a woman, like we in those relationships, it's like, well, I don't want to bother. Yeah. I don't want to bother my friends or family. I don't want to, and I bring that up as a woman because I think that men have kind of lived into that sphere and they know. I mean, they've maybe just been in it longer, just had more models or whatever. Right. And women, while we are so good at relationships, it's like we feel like if we share what's really going on with us or opportunities with those relationships, that we're somehow manipulative, right?
Yeah.
And so, but being like, no, I'm sharing with these people because they're already on my team. Get back to that. They're already fans. They already love me. They already think I'm great.
Right.
I'm going to invite them into this opportunity. Yeah. And I'm going to trust their feedback and their relationships. And I would argue too, like, I need those people to say good job. I mean, to be a part of it, to chime in. And so I guess I just want to offer that word of encouragement for other women leading out there that you don't have to only blast it to strangers on social media. Right. Like, you can make those asks. You can utilize your relationships. Yeah. If you know someone who's a graphic designer, call them and say, hey, would you be interested in considering this? Being courageous enough and vulnerable. I mean, I think this is one of our gifts as women. We tend to be more vulnerable. Utilize that as a strength and ask those people.
Absolutely.
And it's okay if the answer is no.
Right. So two things on that. First, as women, we tend to manage other people's emotions. I don't want to ask them because I know they've got a lot on their plate. And so we shrink.
Yes.
Okay, we'll have to do another conversation about how the patriarchy teaches us to shrink, but that's not who we are, and that's not how you have to approach people. You don't have to be like, hey, give me your Rolodex. And when I say Rolodex, give me all your contacts. You don't have to do that. You can just say, hey, do you happen to know somebody?
Yeah.
Or if you don't, do you know somebody that knows somebody?
Right.
Or, do it in a soft way.
Right.
We're really good at being soft. We're women. But we can also be bold in that softness too. From an empathetic, that's what I think our superpower as women is empathy. So you vulnerable, you tell people what you're doing and then see what bubbles up. Second thing, I was in sales from the time I graduated from college in May 1997. I was really dating myself, but the thing I learned, that my very first job out of college, I actually paid to work somewhere. I worked on commission on sales. I was given a draw of $1,200 a month, which I had to pay back to the company. Anyway, long story. My first job was making 100 phone calls a day, just over and over and over to generate leads. This was back in the dot-com bubble. I worked for a recruiter. Like, this is how you did things back then. There was no real internet, y'all. Sorry. And so what I learned in that, and what I will never forget my sales trainer telling me, is the worst thing they can tell you is no.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen if they tell you no?
Yeah.
Is that going to crush your dreams for life? Right. Well, that's up to you. Right. That's your choice if you let it crush your dreams. Or you just move on to the next phone call. I couldn't make 100 phone calls. 99 of them were no's to get to that one yes, unless I just kept asking.
Yes.
So the worst thing they can do is say no.
That's something that I have learned in the ministry space too, is that I like to say is, don't be someone else's no.
Right.
And I learned that from a woman when we were talking about a position, and then I said, well, I just don't think she's going to do it. She goes, don't be someone else's no. Ask her, and if she tells you no, then we go on to the next. If you think this person is qualified and skilled and would be a good fit, make the invite. And so often I end up giving that advice as well, because it actually comes with people with relationships. Well, we're already friends, and I know they have a lot going on, and it's like, hey, just ask.
Yeah.
I love that you said that. We as women tend to want to manage other people's emotions as if it's our job.
Right. Oh, my therapist is going to be so proud I said that.
As if it's our job to manage other people's emotions in the room, and I find myself doing that a lot where, feeling like I have to soften my suggestion or my counter offer or my questions. I've found myself lately, even this past week, that when I'm asking questions, I'm like, I'm not against it. I just want clarity.
Right.
Why am I doing that?
Right.
It is okay that I say, and what is the goal of that event?
Right.
And what is the goal of this?
Right.
Tell me, what do you mean by this?
Right.
It is, I don't have to apologize for desiring clarity.
Have another conversation about patriarchy and indoctrination. I would love to.
But no, I think this is important. And this is why I have this desire to create this space where women can talk openly and honestly about the things that we're experiencing in leadership realms, these things that we find ourselves having to come up against and say, I don't have to apologize because I have a different idea.
Right. And you don't have to be awful about it either.
Exactly.
You don't have to be like, you have too been in spaces where it's mostly male dominated and they're just awful about the questions. Mm-hmm. We get to bring balance to that.
Right.
We get to ask the same question in a different tone and maybe slightly differently, still getting the same information back. And we don't have to be awful about it. We don't have to tear down somebody's humanity in order to get the information that we're looking for. We just have to be present and people can sense that. That's what I love about Jesus is he never tore anybody down. Even his opponents, even those people he was calling whitewashed tombs, he was saying that to make a point. And it was never about, making somebody feel bad about themselves. It was to bring to the surface the truth and the truth that will set you free.
Right.
So,
well, I like how you said that you think our superpower is that empathy. And I think that is also kind of just goes back to why, for me, it is so important that women are in so many spaces of leadership and in the church. I wonder often that if there would not be so many scandals and so many issues, if some more women around were to say, hey, I'm concerned. Hey, what's happening here? Or even, hey, you seem tired.
Right.
Maybe you should take a day off.
Right.
Because that, I remember having, we did a spiritual healing or spiritual class. I don't know, taking care of yourself, spiritual care. That's the word I was looking for. And I remember the class was about sexual ethics and how to behave appropriately. And I'm thinking, we all know the right answers to these questions, but the whole day was focused on spiritual care and physical care and mental care. And I was kind of like, I'm confused on the connection here. But basically by the end, I was like, oh, because when you are worn out and exhausted and isolated and not showing up honestly and authentically, that's when you're the most vulnerable to make these bad decisions. Right. Whether they be financially, whether they be relationally, physically, just putting yourself in situations that are not optimal for yourself and or others. What leads you there is that depletion. And so again, when there's a woman in the room who's willing to say, I'm worried about you, because I care for your whole person. It's interesting how many meetings I'm in, and the few that I lead start off with, what's going on with you?
Right. The old Wesleyan adage, how is it with your soul?
How is your soul?
Yeah.
Or where are you seeing God? And I remember I had a team, and it was a woman that I was leading, and she was saying, every time I get so nervous about this question. Okay, let's take it back and realize this is not a test.
Right.
I care about the program and the ministry you're leading, and you're doing great stuff, and I want to hear how I can support you. But before that and beyond that, you as a person matter so much more.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really, it's just important. I kind of went off on a tangent there, but it's important that we recognize that that's a gift that a lot of women bring into the leadership space. And I want to encourage female leaders to don't let yourself lose that part. Right. Don't feel like you have to adapt to whatever else is happening in the room with other leaders to live into that authenticity of yourself.
Absolutely. I can tell you're called to the pastoral ministry because that's what pastors do, right? And it's interesting that you bring up, that question of what would it be like if there were more women involved? That was the question that I asked myself before I started writing my fiction book called Teleiosis, which you may know is the Greek word for transformation. And it's this whole idea, it took off from there. I was like, what would happen if we go back to Genesis, and the fall didn't happen in Genesis 3 at the fault of the woman, right? Adam was standing right there. Again, different podcast. But what if the fall happened in Genesis 4 when Cain killed Abel? Because then you have that break of that relationship. You have violence entering the world. You have harm. What if Genesis 3 continued and Adam and Eve built their family in the garden, and the garden became the civilization where women were leading? And what would that look like? What kind of contrast would that have to the outside world that is full of androcratic male dominance? And so this whole story emerged from there. And the arc my main character goes on is a woman named Anira Boehm. And she was the last heir to becoming a priestess of this Teleosan civilization. And she has to walk through all these trials and her trauma and come out on the other side transformed. But her effects, by being raised in this civilization that women were empowered and the balance between the masculine and the feminine were there, this journey, she affects everyone else around her because just by being who she is. Because she's a woman who lives into being a woman and all that beautiful gifting that it brings, it transforms everything. So,
have you read? I'm gonna forget the name of the book now that I want to say it. I'll have to send it to you. There's a book where a woman takes a lot of our ancient history and tells it from a woman's perspective of this idea of if women were allowed to tell the story, how it might have been different.
Is that The Chalice and the Blade?
It's not that one. No.
Okay.
It's another one. Of course, it's slipping my mind. But
yeah,
you also,
I like that.
While you were talking about that, which sounds really interesting, I couldn't help but think of Wonder Woman, and the movie depiction from the, not the second one, the first one.
Oh, the first one. It was like Gail Gadot,
where she's, where she is, raised on an island with all emperor or whatever, these women who are warriors and all this stuff, But I also think about how, as a superhero, her only real weapon is a lasso of truth.
Yep.
And how powerful that is. And I've actually preached on Wonder Woman twice because I feel like that is such an important piece. And again, connected to this truth is what will set you free, and how that is such a powerful tool. And again, just thinking about more women at the table willing to speak up and say the truth.
Right.
About what's really going on. Right. And for whatever reason, we tend to have that ability. I think for many, many years, women have played the role of speaking the truth at home in confidence to their husband who is in these leadership roles. And, we could argue a couple different ways that might have went, but now as we gain this courage and be empowered to say it out loud in front of others as well of, hey, we really need to be looking at this.
Absolutely. And I think too, I personally, I was raised with the idea that I could do everything the boys could do. I can't. I mean, I'm tall, I'm strong, all that, but I'm specifically and uniquely gifted to do what I was created to do. And I was also created as a woman, as a female. And so living into that and coming to terms with what that actually means. And, oh, by the way, that I'm the other half of the divine image is really, really empowering. And again, I don't have to do that. I don't have to go out and be, bossy or that other B word. I can do it in a way that is unique to me, still communicate a truth. Will everybody like it? No, because not everybody likes the truth. But I can do it in such a way that is authentic to me and helps other people. Yeah. And so when you talk about, things like seats at the table and, I personally think we got to do away with tables all to begin with and just everybody sit on the floor. Like, let's all get on the floor like children and be childlike. And because when you see the interaction of elementary school, like second and third graders, you see where, all the things that they hear and all the things they're taught come into play. But really, when you see them playing, there's no division of the boys have to do this, the girls have to do this. Everybody's just playing and having a good time. So
it's not until I think it's 4th or 5th grade,
right?
You can start noticing, and you can't be friends with.
Yep.
Yeah. So tell me, what is your hope? What is your vision for the future of this leadership organization that you've created, this company, this we that you are building? What is maybe it's not the grand, complete, finished vision, but what are the hopes? What's on the horizon for you?
Yeah. So I definitely want to continue to, tell the stories I feel like I've been given to tell, whether that's writing and speaking. But I really want to grow this this third piece of it, which is helping other people tell their stories, whether I'm telling it, and not just to tell their stories, but to serve some greater purpose in the world. Just helping people do that. I love helping nonprofits. Grant writing's pretty dry stuff, but I can do it pretty easily. I love helping, like 5th or 6th shout out now. LM and I were talking about a book I'm going to help her write. And, I have another former church member who's contacted me about reading her manuscript and, just to get the stories out in the world, whether that's through my publishing company or through any other avenue, just if I can be part of that process to help people tell a story. I mean, even, podcasting, even writing the scripts we're using. I want to help people. And specifically, this is funny. I really wrestled. People would always tell me, oh, you're going to be the next Beth Moore. And I thought, but Beth Moore can only speak to women. Like, I want to speak to men and to women. But recently, just within the last couple of years, I've come back to my center and thought, I think it's going to be just fine if I help women. Because there are going to be men that probably come along with that too. But if I focus and target on helping women become all that they're meant to be, and that's the theme of teleosis, the Greek picture word of teleosis, which means transformation, is you have an acorn, and the acorn has everything in it that it needs to become an oak tree. And I feel like that is truly what I was created for, is to help other people come alongside them and help other people become all they were meant to be, while I'm also, God's already doing that in me too. So, I'd love to help other people.
I love that. That's really, really exciting. And I'm not a fictional reader. I'm, probably a little too obsessed with learning. I got to learn something. I got to gain something. So nonfiction is it. But I'm really, really excited to hear more about that. I think that's going to be interesting. And I love that. Like you said, we already have everything in us. I was asking someone who I admire recently, like, okay, how do I do what you're doing? How do I become what you are? It's kind of how I started. I want to do this. How do I do it? And it was so wonderful. What she said to me was, you already are who you want to be. Right. So continue being who you are. Yeah. And, like I always when I was going to say, well, being me is hard enough. You don't need to try to do it. Like, right. When people say things like that. And she kind of said the same things, like, I'm already being me.
Right.
And I've kind of, I'm not saying I'm perfect at it, but I got it. Got it down. You already are who you want to be. And so just keep living into that. Keep being who you want to be. Keep following those dreams. Keep taking those steps. Along those lines, what would you say is a next step for someone who has a bigger calling, has a new idea? What would be the first next step you would give them to take?
Write it down. Yesterday morning, it was early, really, really early, and I was like in that half waking state, and I got, whatever you want to call it, but it was an idea, and I don't know where this idea is going to go. I don't know if this idea will even go, but I wrote it down. I wrote it in my notes app in my phone, And then I just offered it up. I just said, you know what, God, if you want something to happen with this, I trust you're going to open those doors to make it happen. But my first step is always, when I'm serious about something, I either make a list or I write it down. And yeah, the notes app in your phone counts as writing it down. And then give it some space to breathe and see what happens. If it's something for now, those doors will start opening. Yeah. If it's something for the future, I mean, I said this in our last episode, I was writing for 15 years before I ever fully finished a manuscript and got published. So, you know, sometimes it just takes time because the pieces of your life have to be set up to be for you, and the pieces inside yourself have to be set up so you can receive what's coming.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you. How can people connect with you if they've liked what they've heard? They want to learn more about your services and learn more. How can they connect with you?
Yeah. So I mentioned my website at the top. My Instagram has a link in it, which is basically everything on the website, but in a little bit easier format. So amywvogel.mycanva.site. I'm sorry, it's amywvogel.my.canva.site. And then my Instagram handle is awvogel. My email address is avogelbooking@gmail.com. You know, I do go out and speak places. So, yeah, I think hit me up, check me out, and I'd love to continue the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you again for being here. I really appreciate it. And thank you for tuning in. We'll have all of those links available in the show notes. Also, would love to, again, to hear from you. Where are you dreaming? Where are you hoping to be led? What's the next step for you? We'd love for you to join the conversation. Send your comments and your feedback to sheleadscomments@gmail.com. Thanks again for tuning in. We'll see you next time. She Leads is produced by me, Thea Curry-Fuson, recorded and edited by Pearland Podcast Studios. All thoughts and expressions shared by the guests are theirs and not the organizations they're affiliated with. Thanks for tuning in. Check us out next week to continue the conversation on She Leads.